There are two sides of the shop wall, and they operate very differently and with different priorities. The things that matter to the shop foreman are different than the things that matter to the project management team. That shop wall can be pretty thick, and people can be pretty opinionated on either side of that thing.
Yes. Those two sides of that wall very often don't even sit down and talk.
Tell us who you are and what you do.
So Ricky Horton. I started my company about 5 years ago, called Fabrication Information Systems. Big mouthful. Say that fast a few times, right? And so all I do is just go into fabrication shops and help them implement Tekla PowerFab. Yeah. So I'm a one-trick pony. That's all I do. Is just Tekla PowerFab. Used it in a shop for probably 10 plus years, and we used it to a pretty high level. And I started finding that a lot of the fabricators, Tekla would very often send other fabricators to me or to us in the shop I was at and say, they'd come to them and say, we don't use this very well. What's that look like? And they would say, well, call Ricky at McCombs. He'll talk to you. So I think I talked with 20 fabricators last year I was there. And 2 of them tried to hire me, and I didn't want to move to Saskatchewan, Canada. And I'm like, nope. And so, but those 2 became my first 2 clients and jumped out and just go in. And I love seeing it transform a company because the software touches everything a fabricator does, from estimating all the way through shipping. So it's really more than just a program. It's really the procedures and processes for what you do in a shop. And so it's fun. Enjoy it.
Well, you had, so you hinted at McCombs. So you had been at McCombs for how long before that?
27 years.
See, you're not a one-trick pony. Stop that. You're not a one-trick pony. Stop that. So you were, raised up. that's been your whole career, right?
Yeah. So when I started, there was, I think, 5 guys in the shop.
Okay.
And so I got an accounting background, so I was kind of brought in, let's do some bookkeeping. You can do that. But I was doing that. I was cutting some. I was driving a truck and delivering. I was doing sales. Company that size, you wear a lot of hats, right? And so then we grew and grew, and I shed a few of those hats, but kept a lot of them too. So
can you give me kind of a just a look behind the scenes of when you came in to the industry?
Yep.
What did a shop look like? And it doesn't even have to be the smaller shop like you were talking about, but just even some of the more advanced ones. When you first started, what did they look like when you came in? Yeah.
So the shop we were in, it was. I spoke at AIC show last year, beginning of this year, NASCC. And it was about fabricators growing from small to medium to large fabricators and what that looks like and how some of them done that successfully. And the very beginning of that was, the cool thing about the industry is that most shops start in somebody's backyard or garage, which is really cool. It's kind of, the whole American dream type deal, right? You just start and you go, and hard work, and there you are.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the shop where I was. It was the owner at the time, it was actually his grandfather that started it in 1929. And so the shop that we were in, it was a dirt floor. One end of the building was totally exposed, for plans of expanding out that way and whatnot. And, the equipment was a saw, and, we had some mag drills, and, totally different than today. You're looking for the big saw drill combos and with copers and everything. But it was a saw, it was mag drills, and it was welders and
soapstones and
exactly. Yeah. Pull the torch out, let's cut some stuff, So it was different. But now you got all the electronic equipment and the CNC equipment and everything, and it's amazing. It's a big difference.
Now robotics is kind of the name of the game. And so many of them, even the smaller ones, robotics is becoming more and more accessible for even the smaller fabricators out there.
It is.
And what I found was really interesting, detailing, and we've talked about this, is BIM or 3D modeling drives the robotics. And that's an area that I feel like a lot of fabricators don't quite understand. I don't know. You tell me, like, do you feel like they're starting to catch on to that of like, oh, wait, we might need to invest more into 3D modeling to make sure it's accurate? Or like, what's the mindset there?
I sometimes think so. Then I'll go to other shops and it's like, where are you guys at? Some of them think they're okay because they got a torch in their hand. It's not that bad, but you know what I'm saying?
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, when we first went to robotic welding, it was definitely a detail and standard change for sure.
Yeah.
The software could automatically apply welds, which we did for a little bit, but we wanted it in the model. And so I'm not sure where they are right now. I haven't been back there to talk about that in a while, but there was definitely detail and standard changes where the weld being in the model. Even now I'll find like when we do estimate modeling at a client, the worst case scenario is when we import a model and like welds are on one side of the stiffener, or half the weld is there, or the weld's not even there, but it is over here. That's the worst case scenario, but it's a big difference.
There's a lot of fabricators there's a lot of detailers that will use negative 1/16 welds all across Tekla. Like you're basically like zeroing the weld out. You're attaching parts because Tekla associates, but you're not actually putting the weld values in. Because, hey, I got to annotate that on the drawings anyway.
Yeah.
There's been a real turnover in that process from the detailing world where you're a lot more cognizant and diligent to get actual weld data in.
Yeah.
And not just shop, but also, going ahead and doing the field thing.
Yep.
The weld tools have gotten better too because we got the ability to like apply polygon welds and actually use weld preps and all this stuff that just wasn't there before. So that's more robust.
But there are a lot of detailers still that are stuck in where as long as the drawing's okay, then we're good. Right. Doesn't really matter what the data is when it comes. And they're not saying that, but that's almost the way it looks because they're doing things to kind of fudge it to make the drawing say what you want, but the data now is really, to me, the most important part of it. Yeah, the drawing is certainly still important, right? But the data is, I won't say nobody looks at the drawing. That's the wrong thing to say. But the majority of the time, everybody's looking at the drawings when it comes to fit and weld. Everything before that, you import a release for fab, I'm looking at the data. I'm not looking at the drawings very much, and so there's still a lot of detailers out there that they haven't figured that out, and they'll fudge some stuff and then it comes in, it's all wrong. We bought a lot of plate that was not plate. It was like grout or something that came into the model.
Gosh.
That was rough.
Yeah, you get that material grade wrong.
Yeah.
Grout comes in as an A36, then it's a plate, and that all comes in.
Yeah.
It feels very exposing, almost overreaching because you're used to, I'm going to put this drawing out. That's all the world's going to see.
Yeah.
And then it's like, no. We're going to lift the skirts, as it were, a little more than that and see everything under the hood.
Yeah.
And so as we're looking under the hood, it's like, oh man, well, you didn't do your weld data right.
It shifted even during like my time detailing. Like, it really wasn't as much pressure to get the welds dead on in the model whenever I was first starting in detailing.
Yeah.
And towards the end of my career, it became way more pressure to get just the model end has to be right. Otherwise, that affects your robotics. That affects the efficiency in the shop. And that's what your clients are asking you to do is make their tooling equipment, or make their equipment more efficient. It's wild to me because even the modeling aspect, you almost kind of become a robotic troubleshooter.
You're
in
a
a way.
robot driver.
You're a robot driver as a modeler. And then often we would have to correct NC files because they would go absolute cray-cray on our fabricators in the shop.
Yeah.
And we had one go rogue we had one guy, I think, was it an NC file that went rogue, or was the robot that went rogue?
When it slit its own throat?
Yeah, when it tried to slit its own throat.
Day two,
the
plasma line tried to slit its own throat. Not great.
Yeah, like the head came around and it like went to one of the hoses and it cut. It was the hydraulic line first, but right next to it was the O2 line.
Yeah.
And
bad news there, man.
It was one of those hit the red button, stop the train. Holy crap. But like that was one of those instances is like if the NC file goes crazy, then I mean, crap, we'll leave a crater in the ground where your shop was.
We had to go studying the DSTV standards to figure out what the flip's in an NC file. You know, like what are all these blocks and what does it all mean? And then, you know, a lot of times you're doing conversion because it's coming out in metric anyway. So that's fun too. And then, you know, now a lot of that's turning into XML.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
it is.
Which is even more exposing. Like there's more data coming out. So you really do like the mentality is like, I'm going to be a robot driver now.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Well, but a lot of people get too, I said it the other day and a lot of people didn't get this, but too George Jetson, too push button. And that's all I do is push a button and it goes. I remember walking through a shop one time and I saw a beam rolling down the rollers and the cope looked like it was melted, not cut, right? I mean, it's just melted off of there and it's just hanging on and somebody's going to have to go torch it off and whatnot. And I'm like, what is going on? And walk out to the machine room and the guy that was running the coper he's just very push button. It's just like I push button, tell it to go, you know? Mm-hmm. Well, our coper would do either oxy or plasma. And so he was running oxy on there. And I'm like, what's going on with these copes? He's like, it's just not cutting good. I'm like, well, are you adjusting the oxygen, adjusting gas? What are you doing? And he's like, what do you mean adjusting gases? I'm like, okay, we probably need a little bit of a lesson on how to do some torching before we run the machine. But it was, it's almost a curse at sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that translates to detailing. I mean, like you can do a lot of things in a software, any software, and be very productive there, you know, air quotes productive, but you know, if you don't have the context behind it, I mean, what your output is going to be is you've got to be able to know, like, I want this outcome. Yeah. And then start at the beginning and start working toward that outcome. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's, maybe a little bit of what we're seeing in the industry. I mean, because I could take that up and down the chain of construction and scale that.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the biggest problems with that, though, is that a lot of people that are doing that, whether it's detailing or whether it's running a machine or whatever, they didn't actually do the work that is going to be the result of it. So in other words, a guy working through in the shop, running a torch in his hand, a hand torch, you know, or doing copes by hand and whatnot, that makes a big difference when you go to a machine, you go to the more automated. It's a world of difference in those operators, you know, if they actually did it. Or like detailing, you know, the whole thing was, did you detail on the board, you know? Yep. Yeah. Those type guys had to really think through it without the software telling them. And don't get me wrong, the software telling them is great. You know, that's where we need to go. But you need, like I say, you need to understand what's going on in the background in order to really be good at it, you know? So
it blows my mind to think back detailing on a board. Like I don't know, man. That that would hit me occasionally whenever I was like scrubbing or something. I'd be like, man, they used to have to do this all by hand. I was just like,
they had the neatest handwriting too.
Oh my gosh, it's incredible. It's incredible.
It's crazy.
But yeah, it just blows my mind that people used to do that all by hand. But at the same time, it was artwork, man. Yeah, it was artwork. Yeah. And so much respect for anybody that can still actually go out there and do that stuff. It's crazy. Yeah. I know they're out there. I've seen some of the pictures. There's a few of them that comment on our posts on LinkedIn. Yeah. They'll be like, hey, check this out. I just did this. And I'll be like, golly, that's gorgeous. So cool.
I write like a doctor. You can't read it, right? I was terrible. No. Worked with a guy years ago, and he went through, I don't know if you know, the old Carolina Steel that used to be in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. He went through their apprentice program. He was like, I swear he was like 80 years old when I was like 20 or something, you know. But the dude was he went through the program, learned the detailing on the board. He was the most meticulous thing, and he was awesome, man. He was great. I mean, I was envious of his handwriting, but he was amazing. He was a great detailer. But then he kind of started doing just some project management and whatnot, and it just made him light years above everybody else.
You know what's funny about that is the guys that started on the drafting board.
Yep.
It took a long time to get a point of reference. Like you start out and you're like, you get to draw whatever. Yep. I mean, in the architectural community, it's like you're drawing the bathroom stalls. Like you lay out the bathroom stalls. Yeah. There's an equivalent to every industry. Like you get the newbie in there and you go, draw that. Can't screw that up. Yeah. And they draw it 150 times and you're like, all right, draw this. Yeah. And they don't even know they've got no point of reference. In modeling, there is a point of reference because when I come out, I can see the structure. I can see the column is connected to the beam with a shear tab and bolts, and there's a weld on there, and I can see why the dimensions are what they are. You get a more immediate feedback loop and frame of reference for what you're doing. The reality of it, though, like what it's really like in the field, to see that, like the magnitude of a W27.
Yeah.
You know, how large that actually is.
Right.
The process of welding, weld access, bolt access, things that like shop processes where, you know, I missed a dimension, whatever, just dimension, but it was going down the line.
Yeah.
That can be quite the aggravation when the whole line's moving and then you don't pick up the phone when they call you on the shop call.
That's the thing. Interestingly now, I feel like the dimensions on drawings are becoming, at least on shops, are becoming less and less critical, I'll say. They are critical for QC.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yep.
But when it comes to actually making the part, like you've got stuff now that'll just like, it'll just set it.
It just does. Yeah.
Well, even QC is changing. That petty assembler will go through and not only is it fitting parts on the main piece, it's also checking that.
Yeah.
So if you're a 30-second off, it will flag you on your single part or your main part. So it's actually going through and scanning that whole member to make sure that it's in compliance first. It doesn't go blindly through and just fit. It's like, do I have the right thing? Was it fabricated the right way? So that means if your kerf got away from you a little bit on a shear tab and your edge distances are 1 3/8 instead of 1.5 inches, it's going to flag it and be like, nope. So you talk about QC. Yeah, that's a little more difficult with the naked eye. Just putting something down on there, it just is not. It won't go.
Well, even like the copers. You take a Vortman V807 or where I was, we had FICEP equipment, and it would scan the piece before it coped, and it would tell you whether it was out of tolerance from the mill spec. I don't know what tolerances were put in there or what spec they put in there, but it was scanning. It would tell you, hey, it's like this or it's like this too much, and it would flag you, and you make decision overrides. So, and then, we had AGT robots, and the AGT, it was weld only, so we would fit it up, and if you put it in that machine and then it scanned it, just like you're talking about, it would flag you in a heartbeat if it wasn't in the right spot, and it would just stop. So kind of QC was done by machine in a lot of ways. So
it's interesting watching, just processes change, the QC process. Something like, they have like weld scanners now. You've seen these?
Yep.
Like you get a weld scanner and actually put a weld scanner, and it will bill a report out based on your scan of a fillet weld and tell you whether the throat's correct, the legs are the right length. Yeah.
That's cool.
So you have a report that says that the weld's compliant.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
I wanted to use the Microsoft HoloLens with Trimble Connect.
Yeah.
And do that for some QC. But they never, it felt like they kind of got here, but they needed to be here.
Never quite got there. There was a total station aspect of it too for locating, and we can talk through that workflow.
It never was there because with Trimble Connect, if I'm not mistaken, you would have to create an IFC file for every member in order to see, which Well, that'd be fun for a detailer, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So it just never quite got there. It didn't feel like. But
FabStation is actually trying to do that now.
Yes.
FabStation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I haven't heard of them.
Like more of a virtual layout of parts. Because that was the first thing that, well, I think probably any detailer steel guy will go to is like, I see the HoloLens.
Mm-hmm.
I've got parts and pieces over here.
Yeah.
Like if I can just overlay it and I can walk down this thing.
Yeah.
I can just look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess the next iteration of that though is that, oh, well, if the piece was on there and the robot just scanned it anyway, why do I need that?
That's the element. If your robot's scanning it to QC, then it defeats the purpose of walking around it.
Yeah.
You know?
We saw the problem with the HoloLens was just that if you got a 45-foot long piece, having that stay accurate across the whole 45 feet was pretty difficult.
Yeah,
there was a drift that would happen. So you might even inch off by the end of it.
Well, and it wasn't easy to snap it to the piece either, which I think is what FabStation has kind of perfected, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But you kind of had to just move it a little bit. It wasn't great.
It's hard to move it precisely. Too, because I mean, when you're dealing in 16ths. It kind of matters. Like that little, I got to be able to check this accurately.
I took my son to NASC this year.
Yeah.
And there were just some moments where he's like, well, you know, what should I do?
Yeah.
And I'm like, go look at the robots.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he could walk around. I took a little walk around the exhibit hall. I'm far more interested than he is.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting looking at, you have very large robots, automated fitting and different things like this, welding coming in. Like these are some new things. But then also layout, like rail layout.
Yeah.
So being able to project a rail layout on a table and be able to lay your pieces in.
Yep.
Pretty cool.
Oh, so you got the lightning rail, which is basically a big printer, right? You've seen that. So you got that. And then you have the projector. And I've got clients that have both of those.
Lightning rail. I haven't seen this.
Yeah, lightning rail is basically just a massive printer. You basically put plate up there, and you can either fabricate there. Some shops will have the plate up there, and then this thing just goes and it starts printing the rail, just the outline of the rail. Huh. And then some shops will then pick that plate up, take it over to a fitting station, set it down. They just put it in, the pickets in the lines, and you start going at it. Oh. And it pretty sweet.
That's
and
cool.
Then you literally just wipe it off, print the next one, and which was pretty cool. But then you got the laser thing too that is over top, and that messes with you for a little bit until you get used to it.
Messes with your eyes just a bit.
But I've got clients with both of those, and it's pretty nice too. As long as it's, the bigger it gets, the more flicker you're going to get. So it can work great though for those big mist shops. Man, they need that stuff. So it's it's pretty crazy where it's going, and it's just exploded. In the past 5 to 10 years, all this stuff has really just exploded on the scene, and people are really starting to grasp it now. And so it's been. I love that side of it. I love the machinery side. You talk about going to the NASCC, and so this past year. My son works at the shop I used to work at now, and so when it was in Charlotte, then he came down to that show, and I'm just geeking out over steel with my kid now, which is awesome. I think it's great, and so we're walking around the show, and he's on the miscellaneous side of things in the shop, and so I'm like, man, they threw you into the fire right away. Structural's the easy part, but and so he's over there looking at all the layout tables, and they don't have one where he is, and I'm like, you guys need to talk them into that, but. They have the machinery now to do all the copes and everything for rails and everything. Like you got your EMIs, you got your Dragons, you got all those type machines, and so they've got all that in there. But they
have a bender.
They got a bender as well, but it's kind of
pretty cool.
It's kind of semi-automatic. Theirs is. You kind of got to you program it in, then you got to turn it the right way. Then you tell it to go ahead and do the bend. So there's semi-automatic, but it's pretty crazy though.
That's cool. So you see the benders where the rail will come out and it looks like a spaghetti noodle, being shaped coming out one end. So you get one seamless piece. You're not like welding elbows in to get a radius. Or anything. But on a flip side of that, different industry, rebar. they've got like an unbender for rebar.
Oh yeah, I've seen these.
That's just fun to watch too.
That was pretty
Feed
crazy.
a piece of rebar that's all bent the heck in. That just whoop, bend it straight.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, great for repurpose and reuse of something that, well, right, should have probably gone in the dumpster.
It was a video on LinkedIn. I think somebody shared that. I love those videos that people find. Have you seen those little miniature ones? Like the little miniature, they do like miniature rebar.
Yeah.
And they have like, they'll pour concrete and they'll do like bridges.
Oh, yeah.
Or like
a model.
Oh my gosh, it's so cool. But it's a scale model of a building, but it's detail accurate.
Yeah.
And so they're just putting in little pieces of rebar and everything. And it's just like so precise. I love watching those things. There was another dude that he built a bridge over like a tributary in his backyard.
Yeah.
And it's like just tiny little like train bridge almost.
Yeah.
But yeah, he like poured all the concrete in there and did everything. I'm like, anytime those things pop up on my feed, I will sit and watch those. That detailing cars.
Rodney sent us that.
Oh yeah, Rodney Long.
He was like, "Here, show this to the kids. They'll get a kick out of it."
Dude, yes.
It's like a great way for a kid to learn the whole process
of
construction and everything. And,
yeah.
Oh, that's how it gets together.
It's awesome.
And I'm actually the one nerding out over it.
Yeah.
We were talking before about how you're always your head's up in the ceiling when you walk into places. So I don't know. I don't know at what point that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't start there.
No.
I remember going to a Tekla conference and I'm like working on my schoolwork while, Dad's up there giving some presentation and I'm like, whatever.
I already heard
somewhere
it
along
on the way here.
Yeah, man. I get to hear this all the time. And then, I don't know how many years later, man, somewhere along the way, I started looking up in the ceiling and seeing the steel everywhere. And, oh, man, how'd they do that? And
my wife forgets. She's like, oh, would you stop looking at that? I'm like, no, you can't stop looking at that. That's the cool stuff.
The best part is when you find something wrong. I love it. Why the heck did they do that? You sit there and you nitpick everything. That was fun at NASC. Is like you get over in a conversation with somebody, and then if you run out of things to talk about, everybody just kind of looks up. Right? It's like conversation material runs dry, and then they're like, hey, do you see that detail up there? And immediately everybody just starts ranting, and then like, you have the entire crowd walking around with their heads just looking into the ceiling. It's the best.
We went to Hard Rock, the Hard Rock Stadium, and I'm looking at a walkway while we were on break.
Yeah.
Right. I just go out there and I'm looking up and I'm looking at connections on steel. I straight up was trying to do the math for how much I felt like this series of beams was over-engineered. And like how much was spent, like that they shouldn't have spent on these two little ramps.
Yeah.
I calculated between $2,000 and $3,000 of extra material that I felt like they had wasted on there.
Really solving the world's problems there, man.
I didn't have anything to do in the moment we were waiting to come. So I'm like, I'm going to occupy my brain with something here. So
you need to go to a building that you've actually detailed and see who all is critiquing it, right?
Yeah, right. Either that or see how it actually turned out.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like,
that's not the way I drew that.
I did not draw it that way.
We're doing a concourse right now that I'm like keenly aware. I'm going, there's going to be a lot of people walking through here looking up and being like, oh, why did they do that? I'm very aware of the
Eddie,
work
let me just
being
stop you there. Nobody will.
Nobody
not a single person.
No.
Ricky might go through there.
You're wrong. Yeah, you're wrong. Because the steel guys will come through there and they're going to be like, I wonder who did this steel.
They're going to have NASCC here or some year and everybody's going to walk through.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
I'm not going to say which one though.
But it is in Georgia.
So tell me something I've always wondered.
Yeah.
Since I'm come from fabrication, not a detailer. You're talking about the rails and bending versus elbows and whatnot. So one of the biggest issues I run across is where the rails are not detailed the way that they actually fabricate it. So it might be detailed with elbows.
Or just miters.
Yes.
That sort of thing. Yep.
When they actually have a bender. And I'm told by clients all the time, I'm like, they just, it's too much trouble or blah, 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 whatever, right? I'm like, well, can't that be done? So tell me from your perspective, how hard is it from one way to the other? Is it just communication of of here's what I want it to be like, right?
Yes.
That's what I assumed, but it's always a problem.
Here's what sucks as a detailer.
Yep.
Here's what sucks.
Here's what
being
sucks.
in the chair that I sit in so many times. And I've ranted on this a little bit, but you get the 150-page detailing manual.
Yeah.
And that detailing manual has been updated, maybe, kind of, sort of, over the last 8 years.
Yeah.
Might be in paper, might be in PDF, done by a detailing manager or PM
or a consultant
or an admin, an office admin that just, because AISC came through and said, we're going to do audits. You really ought to have this stuff on.
Yeah.
You need a detailing manual, and somebody does it.
Yep.
Does it get updated? Yeah. Well,
when they call you and
then a piece of equipment, then you buy the bender.
Yeah.
And then, nobody bothers to tell you on the front end, actually we bend all the rail. What's painful is just like finding out about that when the work's set, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I've just gone through all the pain to do this. Everything's drawn. And then, bending a rail. I've got, 5, 10 different pieces of rail to go through a handrail that's neighboring a guardrail. Or I can make that one.
Yep.
And it kind of snakes its way up through all of the bends.
Yep.
That part's going to orient on a drawing completely different.
Yeah.
And I've got a number of single parts that I might not have. It's just completely going to blow my drawing up.
Yep.
So just knowing on the front end, I can set up for it. I can totally set up for it.
It takes more time, but I'll say. It does, when you bend them, it does take more time in detailing, I feel like.
There are settings to make that happen.
I realize that. But when you get down into the drawing level, that's where it starts to get weird, because then you've got to basically you have to have your lines. You got to project those out so that everything stays square, right? It always took me way more time to detail with the bends versus just having the miter. And so I think that's the reason why you see a lot of that, is because it's a time thing. It takes so much time to do it that way. There are settings that can help you. For sure, but it's a setup. It is a setup thing.
We see two sides of the miscellaneous world, because there is a side that's like, draw the thing on a piece of paper and send it to me.
You really hit a nerve here. Yeah. You really hit a nerve here.
I thought it would be.
There's another side.
Poke.
Yeah. The other side of it is like, no, we're going to build what you model. Like you're a robot operator, and so it's all going to get mitered that way, fit that way. So send us everything.
Yeah.
Send us all the single parts and all of the. It's not an NC file. In that instance, the machines that deal with railings, I believe, deal in XML.
Yeah.
But it's just different.
Well, it's a beef with me too, because a lot of clients that I go to, it's like detailing can make the fabricator's life so much better or so much worse, and I find that they don't communicate hardly at all. Send them a manual. I don't really know what's in the manual though, but send them the manual. This is what we're supposed to detail like. But I go and specifically on the rails, it's like, okay, well, I can't do a cut list on miscellaneous because the rails aren't detailed the way that we fabricate. I'm like, well, why not? And well, the detailer doesn't send it to us that way. Well, have you asked? And they beat around the bush, and they're really good politicians. They talk all around the question without answering the question, right? And ultimately, they probably don't go back to the detailer and ask. Yeah. And that's one of the biggest problems. It's kind of like with the PFXT file. We were talking about PFXT versus KISS files earlier. I'm pushing to kill KISS files just because the PFXT file that has the XML and the drawings and the CNC files in there, such a better file type. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of different reasons, but I'll go back to clients and I'll be like, why are you not using the PFXT file? Why are you still using KISS files? That's what the detailer sends me. I'm like, well, do you want the other file? Well, yeah. I'm like, well, are you asking for it? Well, they send me the KISS file. I'm like, come on, guys, communicate with them. detail, I haven't met a detailer yet that really is just like, yeah, I'm going to do whatever I want to. You know, I'm not going to listen to you, but I don't know. That frustrates me.
There's also an aspect of like, if we're going into like the detailing manual and the handbook that gets passed out, sometimes the standards are based off of like AutoCAD.
Yeah.
That's a different thing. Like that's a whole different animal. And sometimes they're based off of SDS2. Yeah. And then sometimes they're based off of Tekla. Yeah. And so you also need to be cognizant of like what your detailer is using as their tool of choice, and how you select your detailers is based off of what tools they use. That way it can be quicker alignment to your standards, right? Yep. Give us this, give us this, give us this. Because if this guy over here uses SDS2 and your standards are around Tekla, they're going to struggle. But if your standards are around SDS2 and this guy's using Tekla, we've had that happen several times where it's like, oh yeah, just do this. I'm like, that's not as easy for us to do here, just the way it works.
But one of the biggest disconnects though is that the very often the guys that are sending the standards, like at a lot of shops, is the project managers that are the point man with the detailer, right? And so the standards, though, in a lot of ways are built for what they need in the shop, and a lot of that greatly affects what happens on an import, right?
Yeah.
So these guys badly need it a certain way, and the guy that is talking with the detailer is like, okay, I'll ask for it. If he doesn't get it, it's like, we just got to get in the shop. I'm going to forward it on. And then these guys are getting the pressure. Yeah. I'm like, here's what I need. I want this to be done with the detailing standards, and they're not the person talking with the detailer. And so this guy's like, just get it done, you know. And so these guys just get it done, then the standards go away, and nobody ever looks at the standards again.
It never gets fixed, and this just continues on every single day.
Exactly.
Same thing.
Exactly.
I hate that there are probably people out there that hate our guts because of something getting blamed on us.
That makes me feel bad.
We never had a chance to actually explain why we did what we did.
Yeah. Well, detailer always gets blamed anyway.
Yeah, right? So easy fall guy because it's a silent fall guy.
Right.
Right. So if I'm in the field and something goes wrong, detailer messed up.
Yeah.
You know, it's an easy fall guy. Yeah. I'm not saying everybody just passes the buck, but I know it happens.
But everybody passes the buck. No.
That happens. One thing I've learned about the politics of a fabrication shop is there are two sides of the shop wall, and they operate very differently and with different priorities. So the things that matter to the shop foreman are different than the things that matter to the project management team. Yep. And then one interesting element to what you do is that what you are trying to implement is actually supposed to serve to tie those two together.
Exactly.
So you're trying to break that shop wall down, because that, I mean, you can probably speak to that. That shop wall can be pretty thick, and people can be pretty opinionated on either side of that.
Yes. and there's that shop wall is there. There's a silo of information here, a silo of information here. And really over here, there's multiple silos of information. And that's exactly what the software is supposed to do, is like, here's where we go to get all our information. Everybody has access to the information. But they all want to use it to where I have to call Bob to figure out if something's cut, or I have to call somebody to figure out stuff. But those two sides of that wall very often don't even sit down and talk either.
Yeah.
And to me, with the detailers, to me, the fabricator ought to call the detailer and actually say, hey, watch me import this, and let me show you what this is actually doing. Because a lot of detailers don't have a clue what that file does, you know, and what they're doing with it. Yes. And it makes a world of difference.
Well, a lot of PMs don't have any clue what it looks like to actually export it.
Yeah, yeah.
Just go, well, it didn't work. Yep. And you're like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
So watching each other on either side of that fence is good. That's another wall.
Yeah.
It's just trying to figure out, like, what does this take from you? Like, I'm asking you to do this thing. What does it take?
Yeah.
It might be an easy thing, like a button.
Yep.
Or it might be a very difficult thing, like, oh, geez, you're going to have to re-engineer your whole process in order to meet this mark.
When I go into a shop and I'm trying to get them to best practice files to get from the detailer, right? And once again, I'm going back to this PFXT thing. The fabricator they know what to ask for. But if the detailer's never done it, the detailer says, okay, cool. How do I do that? And the fabricator's like, I don't know. This is what I want. And the detailer's like, well, I don't know how to do it. And so neither one can really tell the other one. And you're right. If the fabricator could understand what's going on with the detailer and see it, then it makes a difference. But there's videos and stuff that I'll use to send to detailers to say, here's how you create that file type. And it seems like all simple and everything, but it's not that simple. It's relatively simple, but it's not that simple. But everybody ought to me, watch an export, then the detailer watch the import. And I've done that with clients. I'm like, let's call the detailer. They're struggling with why we want this stuff. Let's show them why. So,
well, yeah, I mean, understanding the why behind it is so critical to getting buy-in from your detailer as well, right?
Yep.
Like, I mean, there were so many times where it was like, this isn't coming in right.
Yep.
And it just stayed there.
Yep.
It just isn't coming in right.
Right.
I need a new version. I need to do this. I need to do that. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
I need to understand your process so that I can help you.
Yeah.
Instead of just force feeding it down my throat and saying like, cause I do. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, help me here. That was something, like, it's a great point, because that was something I don't think I ever actually did with any clients, of like sitting down and saying, let me see you import this.
Yeah.
I want to see what happens on your end. I don't think I ever did that.
Yeah.
None of them asked for me to show them how I export.
All right. So one thing that is a commonality in the show is that we come back to communication a ton.
Mm-hmm.
And you're breaking down that barrier of the shop wall. You're breaking down the silos that lie between them.
Yep.
That's industry wide. So we've been nerding out and steel and talking, really getting amped up about it, because this is where we live every day. We didn't think it was going to be very hard to do. But, this does scale to the industry. This is GC to fabricator, any other specialty contractor. Like, you are breaking down walls that are between you and another entity and trying to work better. And it never hurts to get on the phone or Zoom call and watch each other do what you're asking. Like, here's what's involved.
Yep.
Have we queued you up for the megaphone question? You coming in cold here. So we have a little question we like to ask everybody. The megaphone question. And that is, if we gave you a megaphone to speak to the whole industry, what would you want to say? So give you 60 seconds to do it, and it's a loose 60 seconds.
It is a loose 60 seconds, because I don't have a watch on. So enjoy.
I got to watch, but I try not to look at it mid-show because it's rude. But 60 seconds and a megaphone. What would you have to say to the industry?
Well, I come from the steel industry, which I just love. But one of the things I've just been screaming for years is just use the tools you got. I go in, and shops that have Tekla PowerFab, this is common amongst a lot of fabricators. I'll have it. I'm dabbling with it. I have my toe in the water, and they got this Ferrari that they might have in second gear, or some of them haven't even pulled it out of the garage, and they're not driving it, right? They're pushing it. And use the tools that you got. And they sacrifice the long term for the short term. And what I mean by that is, a lot of shops I go to won't sit down long enough to just understand the tool while I'm even there. It's like, oh, I'm busy today, I can't get in there. Use the tools you got, because that's going to save you in the long run. It's going to save time. It's going to save money. It's frustration. There's so much it can do. And if the industry would just take the tools that they have, take a look at it, see how it can help them, and sit down and actually learn it, man, their stress level goes down. You become, you start preventing fires rather than just putting out fires. And it's the pandemic, it really is. So
on the fire side of things, I had one guy, he emailed me one time, and this is not recommended practice, for the record, kids. This is not recommended practice. Hit me up, and he was like, this thing is on fire right now. I need help. How did I, like, he's ranting about it, all caps, one of those sorts of emails, which I'm sure you've received at one point or another. And instead of helping him, I sent an email to his local fire department, or basically I sent him the address and his phone number to the local fire department. I said, you might actually want to call them for a fire. So anyway,
100% true story.
100% true story. Yeah. Did actually send him the address and the phone number to the local fire department. Sometimes I just like to step in stuff. Ricky, thanks for joining us this week, man.
I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.